Hello my friends, Jeff, Tax Rescue CPA. Today I want to talk about something that just isn't any fun. There's no other way to put it, but owing taxes to the IRS and being worried about what they're going to do if you don't pay their taxes simply isn't any fun. Now, normally I like to make these videos kind of playful, kind of entertaining, but today we just need to talk about the facts and understand that what's going on isn't pleasant, but needs to be dealt with. So I'm gonna grab a cup of coffee, maybe you do the same, and let's sit down and talk about what's gonna happen if you don't pay your taxes. Okay, the coffee's brewing, and I wanted to set this up as to what this video was going to speak to and the position where you are right now. So I'm assuming that you've filed your tax returns and there has been, this could be one return or multiple returns. I'm going to kind of keep that open, but you filed the returns and there is tax due on those returns and payment wasn't made at the time of filing. So the IRS receives the returns and there's an amount due and they have no money to go against it, okay? If you haven't filed your tax returns, that's a step that needs to happen sort of before this video. And there's another video about that, about what the IRS is gonna do if I don't file my tax returns. But this video, we're gonna assume that you filed your tax returns and that you haven't paid the tax and the IRS is going, where's the money? Okay, I've got my coffee, hopefully you do too, and let's talk about this. So, first of all, I'm glad you sent the returns in. It's always better to file the returns than to not file the returns. I know it can be uncomfortable sending in that return knowing that, what can is this gonna open up with these taxes due? But in the long run, you will cause yourself much less heartache and financial difficulty by sending in the returns as soon as possible. It's always the first thing I do when clients come to me and they haven't filed and paid their taxes as well. We need to get the returns in, we need to file them. So I'm glad you've done that. Now what happens? Well, as you may expect, the IRS is going to quickly send you a letter. You will probably see something in your mailbox within 2 weeks of that return being processed or accepted. And the letter is simply gonna outline in sort of a tone of, maybe you forgot to pay us. There's taxes due. So it'll outline what the taxes amount due are, how much is owed, and then it'll tell you how to pay it, what your options are, and then give you some kind of due date. It's already due, so the due date they put on there is kind of, well, okay, that's a nice suggestion, but it's already past due. Getting letters from the IRS is no fun, even just getting one. I receive multiple letters a day for my clients from the IRS, and even getting letters from the IRS on behalf of someone else is stressful for me. I don't like when I open the mailbox and there's a letter from the IRS. So this is where the stressful part really starts for most people, are these letters. Please open the letter and read it. Make sure you understand what the IRS is saying, what you owe, and you're at some level in agreement, because if there's problems, it's much easier to fix them now than later. Look over that letter and make sure you understand. You could agree or disagree. I guess agreeing would be important here too. But make sure you understand what's going on and say, yeah, I do owe the money based on the tax filing. Now what? Okay, so let's say you still can't pay it. What's the IRS gonna do? Well, at the same time they're sending this letter, they've also started the penalties and interest. They've started accruing those. There may even be a penalty amount and interest on the letter that they send saying, you know what, because it's late. It kind of depends on the timing of when you filed it. But they're going to start assessing failure to file penalty and interest. And the interest is really something that's very straightforward. They just charge an amount over the Fed rate. It fluctuates every quarter. They're going to charge you interest. So that's going to all start basically right when you send in the return. You're going to start getting notices and you're going to start the penalties and interest accruing. Now, the IRS has a cycle on notices of about 5 weeks. And what you're going to notice, if you don't do anything, there'll be another IRS love letter show up in your mailbox after about 5 weeks. Okay, Jeff, what's going to be different about this? This process begins what's kind of a standoff, and with each exchange in this standoff, each party is going to sort of stiffen a little bit and make their position a little stronger. Well, what does that mean? Well, you, by not responding in 5 weeks and paying the amount due, are saying, no, I'm not going to pay. Then the IRS in their next letter is going to say, okay, well, we asked you nicely, now we're going to ask you not so nicely. And these letters, and you're going to, if you don't pay, you're going to take the position of, nope, still not paying, even when you send me a letter. That's a little more challenging. They'll send you another letter. Each of these letters is a little more forceful and a little more focused on the consequences and what they're going to do if you don't pay, okay? So this just begins this back and forth and back and forth. But for the most part right now, the IRS is passively asking for the taxes to be paid. So after a time, and this really depends on a couple of factors, how long this period is. It depends on what time of year you're doing this and how much you owe, and whether and how old it is, whether this is an old return or a more recent return. But eventually the IRS is going to say, you know what, we're going to take a more active role. And they start off usually taking an automated active role, and then they move into assigning your case to an agent, and you actually have a live person asking you for money and potentially even showing up at your door saying, what about some money? But let's talk about this in steps. So what kind of action steps is the IRS going to take when you stiffen and refuse to pay and even communicate with them? This is another thing you can do at this point, is just communicate with them. Well, that will help your case. But let's say you don't pay, maybe you don't even open the notices. What happens next? Well, again, this depends on how much you owe, but the IRS will put a lien on your property. Okay, they'll file a lien in the county where you live, and this will tell everybody, as a matter of fact, that you owe the IRS money, and if anything is sold in your name in that county and there's proceeds from it, this usually affects real estate. The IRS is to get paid before you get any money, so you'll get a lien. This usually doesn't occur. It's not a hard and fast rule, but you need to owe the IRS several thousands of dollars, $5,000, $10,000 or more, before they'll usually put a lien. But they can put a lien or file a lien on you at any point in time. One of the ways you'll know they filed a lien is if you don't open up your IRS mail, is you'll find that you'll begin to receive notices from tax resolution companies, from companies that are strictly designed to help people with large amount of IRS tax debt. Because what happens is these companies watch the filings at the county level, every county in the country, and they watch for new filings from the IRS, and they grab that information because it's public information in most counties, and they'll add you to their mailing list, and you'll start getting notices, junk mail I'd call it, but you'll start getting mail about, oh, the IRS $10,000 or more, call us for help. You'll start seeing that mail. That's how you know you get a lien. Then the next thing you're going to do that they can do that's not quite as aggressive and in your face, but they'll actually revoke your passport. They will send the required paperwork, and this you usually have to be fairly large amount of tax debt. This is going to be over $50,000, but they'll revoke your passport. The idea being is that, we don't want you leaving. We don't want you to leave the country if you owe this much money. So this is another sort of passive thing they do that says, hey, you know what? We're going to make this harder for you to enjoy life since you haven't paid us. Okay, so what about active? This is where it can get a little ugly. So now what the IRS is going to do is they say, okay, we've gone through this process, we've sent notices, we've liened your property, we've grabbed your passport, you're still not paying. We're going, and again, the order on these can kind of vary. It depends on your case, but these are the different options they have, okay? Just keep in mind what they can do. So the next thing they're going to do, they're going to try to grab your money. They're going to grab, the one place they will look is wages. Are you earning wages? If so, they can garnish your wages. They'll contact you, they'll send a letter to your employer, and they'll say, you know what, your employee owes us money. We want this much of that person's paycheck every time they get paid. They can also grab your bank account. They can levy your bank account. They'll send a letter to your bank, and they'll say, you know what, everything that's in the bank account as of now, send to us. It's a long process, but they'll freeze your account, they'll take the money, and eventually they'll send it to the IRS, okay? That your money's gone. They can also garnish Social Security and other retirement benefits. So even if you're retiring or in retirement or receiving retirement benefits, those aren't safe from the IRS garnishing those either. It's good coffee. Today's a snow day. I'm watching the snow fall, so I'm getting warmed up before I go and plow the snow. All right, stay focused, Jeff. Okay, so what else happens? Well, they can also levy retirement accounts. This one really is ugly, but they can go into your IRA account and they can take money from your IRA account in order to pay your tax debt. Basically, any money they can grab is fair game. What they won't do, and this is where there's a lot of fear out there, and again, I say won't as sort of as a loose term, but generally the IRS doesn't take your house. They won't foreclose on your house. They won't grab your house. They can. There's legal mechanisms they can, but it does not create a lot of good PR for the IRS to put people out on the street. So they generally don't do that. I mean, it's a last resort. It could happen. I'm not saying it never happens or couldn't happen. We could probably find, a dozen cases this year where it's happened, but for the most part, it just doesn't happen. And they can't take your car. They don't want your car. They're not a used car dealer. They're not going to take your car. So don't worry so much about them coming in and taking things. The one thing they will take, and this is another video, but if you owe payroll taxes as a business, they will come in and shut down the business and take your business assets. But right now, we're talking about this at a personal level, filing your 1040 taxes, and the IRS is not going to come and take your car. Okay, so that's the forceful action they're going to do. Now, what can you do during this whole process, starting with the first notice you receive where the IRS, remember where they say, hey, maybe you forgot to pay your taxes, maybe? Starting at that point, you have options. You have options, and the options don't really change during this whole process. You have the same options available to you from that first notice until they're starting to take your wages and levy your bank account and grabbing your money any way they can. And your options are basically three. You can set up an installment agreement and agree to pay it over time. You can do what's called an offer and compromise. And that one is where basically you're saying, look, IRS, I know I owe you a lot of money. I'll give you everything I have if you forgive the remainder or the balance, okay? For example, I owe $100,000. I can show you through there's forms for this. I can show you that I have $2,000. Everything I have in life. I'll give you the $2,000 if you forgive the other $98,000. That's called an offer and compromise. And then your third option is to request being placed into currently non-collectible status. And this is a position where you basically say, hey, you know what? I can't afford to pay you right now, okay? I don't have the income. I barely have enough income to live on. Once I do, maybe I can pay you, but right now, there's nothing to collect. This is the can't get blood from a turnip position that you're gonna take, and you just prove to them that the amount of money you have coming in is not enough to pay your basic necessities, and paying the IRS would create a financial hardship. Now, guess what? Yeah, I got videos on all of those different resolutions. You can check those out on my webpage and on YouTube. Check those out on my channel. So those are your options for dealing with this, okay? Or you can just pay the whole amount, obviously. If that's an option for you, paying the whole amount would stop all of this action. But that's what's going to happen, and those are your options to deal with it. Okay, now having gone over all of that, I've laid out what's gonna happen and what you can do. You may be at a point where, you know what, Jeff, this is all overwhelming me. I need some help. I get that. And I'm here to help. That's fine. Seek out professional help. Seek out somebody else. Seek out somebody you know that you can trust with this matter, because it's only going to get worse. And then going forward, what can you do to avoid this in the future? I know right now you're just thinking about how to get out of this situation, but let me just drop this in there as a little bit to keep in the back of your mind. Make sure you file on time. Even not paying filing but not paying is a better situation. Pay as much as you can. Let's say you file your return and you owe $4,000 and you got $1,000. Pay the $1,000, okay? Anything you can pay will reduce the interest and penalties going forward and make it easier to deal with. And then as soon as you realize you're in a situation where you're generating more tax liability than you're paying in, the easiest example is if you're a W-2 employee and for some reason your withholdings aren't correct. Get those adjusted right away. Adjust your withholding as soon as you can to avoid this going forward. I hope this helps. I know this is not a fun situation, but I hope this helps give you an idea that, this is a scary place, but it's not a mystery. What the IRS is going to do is not unknown. They have a very strict set of guidelines they have to follow, and they're going to go down a very specific road in dealing with the fact that you owe taxes and they want to get that money from you. If you need any help with this, again, reach out to me. In fact, here is a invitation to get a free tax review. Well, I'll look and see what's going on and give you some honest advice for free about what you should do. Get the answers you deserve. Thanks for watching. Now go pay your taxes. Who's doing your taxes?